because they felt atmospheric for one way or another. Wow, no. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey, and we are about to get very, very nerdy with some spooky recommendations. I'm gonna make a lot of noise in this video, and I apologize. So today I thought what we would do is talk about some fall recommendations, specifically the first part of fall. I think of fall as like two parts. The first part is kind of October, where it is spooky. You want some kind of Halloween-y, eerie vibes going on there. And then the second part of fall is November, where it's more cozy. You want cozy reads, you want to snuggle, that kind of stuff. So today we're going to be talking about some spooky reads. I do kind of have a part 2 where I'm talking about some cozy reads, which we'll do next month. Today I just have a handful to talk to you guys about. And for me, when it comes to this part of fall, what I like is not scary. I don't do scary, so you're not going to see any horror on here. I think there's only one book, maybe two, that could be considered creepy. And that's just, I just don't do scary. So I haven't read any, so I can't recommend those for you. So today it's going to be mostly like spooky, eerie, gothic vibes. That's kind of what I'm going through. More atmospheric reads rather than like it's gonna scare you reads. But let's just get into some of these recommendations. So this first one is the only one I think that could maybe be considered scary. I think I have one more possibly that would be considered the scary book. And that is House of Salt and Sorrows by Eyre A. Craig. I read this one last October and it legit creeped me out. This is basically a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses fairy tale, I guess you would call it. But it follows our main character, Annabeth, and she is the 5th of her 12 sisters, but she is the oldest still living. All of the 4 sisters before her have died, all from like very mysterious deaths. So let's see, one died from the plague, one died from a drowning, one died because they fell off a cliff by accident. So like they're all mysterious, and she doesn't feel like they're actually what they say they are. And so she, I think, is trying to discover, I've read this, she is trying to kind of figure out what's going on there. But there's definitely a fantasy-esque tone to this book. It's very creepy, it's very atmospheric, it kind of is very, gives me a lot of thriller vibes. But I really enjoyed this. It just was downright creepy. Mostly the ending. The ending legit creeped me out. I could not read this book at night. It still is very good. It gives you kind of like that old manor by the sea vibes, because that's kind of where they live. Everyone thinks that this family has been cursed, that kind of stuff. So it was very good, and I enjoyed it and highly recommend. The next one is a long series, and I feel like I've definitely recommended this before in Spooky Reads, now that I'm thinking about it, but that is the 3 Dark Crowns series. This is the first one. The second one is 1 Dark Throne. The third one is 2 Dark Reigns. And the last one is 5 Dark Fates. But this basically follows 3 sisters in this fairy tale made-up world living on an island. And every queen basically gives birth to triplets, and each triplet has a different power. One's a poisoner, one can control the elements, and one is a naturalist and can control animals and nature and that kind of stuff. And they basically have to fight to the death until one of them is standing, and then that person becomes queen. And so this follows the next generation. This is very kind of like very high fantasy, very spooky, mysterious vibes as well. It gives me very atmospheric, this time of the year vibes, very kind of witchy vibes, if that makes any sense. But I loved this series. I completely devoured the first one, and I think the third one in the series is my favorite. But I liked it a lot. And like even this cover just gives you like the vibes. That's one that I've probably recommended before, but it still holds true to today. The next one is another series as well, and that is the Serpent and Dove series by Shelby Mahurin with its sequel that just came out, Blood and Honey. This basically follows a witch and a witch hunter who, due to circumstances, have to end up getting married, and it's a hate-to-love relationship. But because one of our main characters is a witch, it gives you those witchy vibes as well, because you're learning about this new magic system, and this second one is a lot more gruesome than the first one, I will say. So like, be on the lookout for that. But it's a definitely fun, and like, it's definitely a romance fantasy. Like, that's especially the first one. The first one's main focus is the romance part of it. I love this series, and they give me all the witchy vibes, which is what this time of the year is all about. So that's another series that I really love. The next one is another series, and that is the Wayward Children's series by Seanan McGuire. The first one, Every Heart a Doorway, and the second one, Down Among the Sticks and Bones, are the only two that I have read in this series. So I'm hesitant to say like all of the series, because I don't know, I only know these two. But the first two for sure give me those atmospheric vibes, because Every Heart a Doorway takes place at this home for children who have, kind of like Alice from Alice in Wonderland, who have gone to another world, taken a doorway to a different world, and have come back to the real world, and are trying to cope with the fact that they're not in their normal world. So this one has a kind of murder mystery plot to it in this home. And then Down Among the Sticks and Bones is kind of a prequel a little bit to Every Heart a Doorway, and it follows two characters as they go into their world, but that world is very creepy. It's kind of like, how I think about it is if Frankenstein met Dracula. That's the world this is. So these give me very atmospheric vibes, very creepy vibes, very this time of year vibes. The next book is one book specifically, though the others kind of in this series would also work, and that is Pride and Prejudice and Zombies by Jane Austen and Seth Grahame-Smith. This is basically the story of Pride and Prejudice, but if you added zombies. And it's so much fun, and I loved it. It's a hoot. It's just fun. But it has zombies in it, which are very kind of creepy. Also, this cover is a little unsettling. So like, this works really well. And I say series because technically they're not part of a series, because they're written by different people, but like, I consider them a series. But Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters would work for this as well, because it also has kind of a creepy vibes. But like, if you are a hardcore Jane Austen fan, I guess purist is the word I'm looking for. If you are like a Jane Austen purist, you're gonna hate this book. But if you like Jane Austen and can appreciate a retelling and someone kind of taking this ridiculous thing like zombies and putting it in Regency England, you're gonna like it. I thought it was a hoot. I thought it was so much fun. This just really felt like if zombies existed in Regency England, this is how they would react to them. The next one is also part of a duology, and that is This Dark Endeavor by Kenneth Opel. This is kind of a retelling of Frankenstein. There is a sequel to this one, Such Dark Intent, I think is what it's called. Such Wicked Intent, that's what it's called. It follows Victor Frankenstein when he is 16, and his twin is dying, basically. He's really, really ill. It's not going to last very long, and Victor does not happen it. So his cousin and his best friend, Elizabeth and Henry, join him on the search to find the elixir of life to save his twin. It gets dark, it gets creepy, but I actually really, really enjoyed it. It definitely feels like a YA book. It's definitely more YA, especially dated YA, because I feel like this one came out a while ago. This came out in 2011, so the early 2010s YA, this really, really does feel like it. But I did enjoy it, and it definitely gives me those creepy, scientific fantasy vibes. This really blurs the line between fantasy and sci-fi. So if you want something that like is fantasy but has some sci-fi scientific elements, especially with Frankenstein being so scientifically minded, it was good, and I recommend. And also, like, this cover just gives me creep vibes. The next one is kind of a strange one, because it's a classic, but I feel like it works really, really well. And that is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This one is such a tiny, tiny copy. But this is definitely very creepy vibes to it, because it follows Jane as she's growing up. She's had a really, really terrible life. And she grows up in this boarding school type of atmosphere to become a governess, and then she finally does. She becomes the governess of this big mansion where this man, Mr. Rochester, presides, and it's his ward who she is tutoring. But there's a lot of like eerie things that happen in the middle of the night, and it is a love story, but it's a very creepy love story. So I highly recommend, if you like classics, but if you don't like classics and the story does appeal to you, I would also suggest My Plain Jane by the Lady Janies, who are Cynthia Hand, Bertie Ashton, and Jodi Meadows. This is a retelling of Jane Eyre, and it definitely has more ghosty elements, I would say. It definitely gives you the same story with a twist. So if you like the idea of My Plain Jane, or if you like the idea of Jane Eyre, but you don't want like the classic writing style, I would highly recommend this, especially this retelling specifically, because it does have like ghosty atmospheric events that happen in this. If you want a more sci-fi version of Jane Eyre, there's also Brightly Burning by Alexa Donne, which is basically Jane Eyre set in space. So there are definitely different versions and retellings of Jane Eyre, because I think the story of Jane Eyre is very creepy and works really well for this time of year, but this is my favorite so far, so that's why. This is my biggest recommendation, but anything that kind of is inspired by Jane Eyre, I would recommend, or just read the original. The next one is the only other one that's kind of really creepy or horror-y on this list, and that is the graphic novel series Monstrous. This is volume 1, it's the only one that I have read, but it definitely gives me creepy vibes to it. I don't even know how to describe this, it's just creepy. It's like two groups of people are fighting against each other, and our main girl is trying to seek revenge, but we don't really know on what she's trying to seek revenge on. And then there's this like weird godlike entity that kind of possesses her a little bit. It's bizarre, but like the art style is absolutely stunning. I'm trying to show you one that's not like gruesome, because there's a lot of gruesome scenes in this novel. It's just like not a very pretty story. So if you like graphic stuff and weird stuff, like this is your book. Like the art style is just stunning, and it's just dark. It's a dark story. It's creepy. This is probably the creepiest you're gonna get on this list. The next one is a mystery. I know, shocking. And that is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This follows a boy who I can't remember the name of, Daniel. It follows a boy named Daniel whose father owns a bookshop, and when, like, early on in his life, his dad takes him to this place called the Cemetery for Lost Books. It's this big warehouse, basically, that holds a bunch of books, and so he's allowed to take one and protect that book, and like that is his book. So he takes this book called The Shadow of the Wind and loves it so much that he wants to read other things by this author. So he starts to investigate a little bit and is discovering that there's not really much else out there, and then he also discovers that someone is out there trying to burn everything by this author, and it just sets him off on this big mystery trying to figure out everything he can about this author. And it gets him in some dangerous situations. So this is very mysterious, it's very eerie, it's very, like, it just gives me that, like, mystery thriller vibe that some people are going for at this time of year. So if you want a good mystery, here you go. And the very last book on here is another classic, but I think it's one that everyone will enjoy, and that is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. This is Jane Austen's kind of joke and take on Gothic literature. So if you want Gothic literature, this one, please. So this follows a main character named Catherine, who was super, super naive, and she comes from a very, well, I wouldn't call them very poor, but they're not a wealthy family, and they live next door to this couple called the Allens, who is very wealthy. And one summer, I think, spring, I don't know, sometime, they decide that they are going to go to Bath for the husband's ailments, and they asked Catherine to come along. And so she is obsessed with literature, specifically Gothic literature, and so she comes along with them, and she's super naive, she doesn't really know anything, and she's meeting new friends who may not be friends, or meeting new suitors who you never, like, you don't know what's going to happen there. And at one point she does get invited to this guy that she likes' house, which is Northanger Abbey, and it's a very, very Gothic old mansion, and is creating all of these mysterious situations because of the books that she's read, and sometimes those get her in trouble. So if you want a Gothic feeling book, I highly recommend this one. Also, just like, look at this cover. Isn't it pretty? So those are my fall recommendations. Those are the things that I highly recommend because most of the atmosphere, how it made me feel, but some things are spooky, some things are a little gothic, which is perfect for this time of year. Let me know if you have read any of these books or if you have any fun fall, spooky fall recommendations. I would love to know those down below. But if you did like this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you want to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there as well if you want to follow along on any of those. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!